Have you ever wondered where something as destructive as fascism truly came from? We often picture it as a monster born from the ashes of World War I, a purely 20th century horror. But what if I told you its seeds were sown much earlier, in a time of revolutions, steam engines, and crumbling empires? Welcome to our deep dive into the primordial soil of fascism. We're going on an archaeological dig through history, not just to dust off old facts, but to unearth the very strata of thought that allowed this ideology to sprout. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a lens to understand the world we live in right now, from polarized politics to the us versus them narratives that dominate our social media feeds. Picture Europe in the twilight of the 18th century. The French Revolution's ideals of liberty and reason are echoing across the continent, but so is the sound of the guillotine. As old feudal orders fracture, a powerful counter-movement begins to stir. This is where our story begins, with the first key ingredient: romantic nationalism. This wasn't just about waving flags and singing anthems, it was a passionate backlash against the Enlightenment's cold, universal logic. Thinkers like the German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder argued that every nation possessed a unique folk spirit, or Volksgeist, embedded in its language, its folklore, and its land. He believed each culture was an organic, invaluable whole. This was a revolutionary idea. It celebrated diversity and inspired movements for independence across Europe. But like many powerful ideas, it had a dark side. In the hands of others, this celebration of cultural uniqueness began to twist. Take Johann Gottlieb Fichte, another German philosopher. In 1808, while Napoleon's armies dominated Europe, Fichte delivered his Addresses to the German Nation. He took Herder's idea of a unique spirit and weaponized it. He declared that the German language was superior, that only Germans could truly understand freedom, and called for a unified German state built on cultural purification. Suddenly, the focus shifted from celebrating culture to asserting its dominance. Personal freedom now had to bow to the grand mission of the nation. This wasn't just a German phenomenon. In Italy, similar ideas fueled the drive for unification. In Japan, the Meiji Restoration blended the samurai ethos with a new, fierce state loyalty. This shows us how the romantic idea of a national soul could be adapted and twisted into a tool for exclusion and supremacy anywhere in the world. It's a powerful reminder that celebrating national identity can be a double-edged sword, one that can either empower the oppressed or justify the oppression of others. Now let's turn to a surprising source for fascism's DNA, the political left. It's one of the most misunderstood parts of this story. Fascism didn't just oppose socialism, it stole from it, redirecting its revolutionary fire for its own nationalist agenda. To understand this, we need to meet Georges Sorel, a French engineer who became a radical philosopher. Sorel was fascinated by the power of myths. In his book, Reflections on Violence, he argued that it wasn't rational arguments that moved people to action, but powerful, heroic stories. His prime example was the myth of the general strike, a single cataclysmic event where all workers would stop working, bringing down capitalism in a blaze of glory. Sorel believed this myth, whether it was realistic or not, could inspire people to perform heroic acts and transform society. The logic didn't matter. The emotion did. And who was paying close attention? A young Italian socialist named Benito Mussolini. Mussolini saw the genius in Sorel's idea but gave it a nationalist twist. Why unite the workers of the world against the rich when you could unite the workers of your nation against other, supposedly decadent nations? He took the myth of class warfare and reframed it as national warfare. The heroic struggle wasn't for the proletariat, it was for the glory of Italy. This ideological theft shows us that fascism isn't a simple right-wing ideology. It's a chameleon, a hybrid that borrows ideas from across the political spectrum. It takes the language of liberation and twists it into a call for domination. This is a crucial lesson for today. In highly polarized societies, tactics and ideas from one side can easily be co-opted and used by the other, often with dangerous consequences. The late 19th century brought another potent ingredient into the mix: social Darwinism. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was revolutionary, but it was quickly misapplied to human societies. The English thinker Herbert Spencer coined the phrase survival of the fittest, arguing that competition was the engine of human progress. He believed that helping the poor or the weak interfered with the natural order. This brutal logic became the perfect justification for the era's colonial frenzy. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, European powers literally carved up Africa, believing it was their right as fitter civilizations to rule over others. In this worldview, strength wasn't just a trait, it was a moral virtue. Weakness was a sign of inferiority. This mindset infected national politics. In Italy, a humiliating military defeat in Ethiopia in 1896 fueled a thirst for revenge. Thinkers began promoting the idea of proletarian nationalism, casting Italy itself as a poor, struggling nation that deserved its own empire by right of force. The Italian sociologist Vilfredo Pareto argued that history was just a circulation of elites, where strong, decisive rulers, lions, naturally replaced weak, indecisive ones. This provided a pseudoscientific justification for authoritarian rule. The message was clear. Progress comes from domination, and compassion is a weakness the strong cannot afford. As the 19th century bled into the 20th, Europe was gripped by a sense of crisis. This was the fin de siècle, the end of the century. Rapid industrialization had created massive cities, but also immense squalor, alienation, and social unrest. People felt disconnected from tradition, and many felt that the modern world was decadent, corrupt, and meaningless. Out of this chaos, a new rebellion emerged, one that didn't want to fix the modern world, but to burn it down. This was the spirit of Futurism, an art movement led by the Italian poet Filippo Tommaso Marinetti. In his 1909 Futurist Manifesto, he wrote, "We will glorify war, the world's only hygiene, militarism, patriotism, the destructive gesture of freedom bringers." The Futurists worshipped speed, technology, and violence. They were obsessed with smashing the old world, museums, libraries, and morality to make way for a new, energized future. Marinetti and his followers saw violence not as a last resort, but as a creative and cleansing force. This glorification of violence and irrational action found fertile ground. In France, the infamous Dreyfus Affair, a spy scandal fueled by anti-Semitism, tore the country apart and gave rise to integral nationalism, which demanded absolute, unquestioning loyalty to the nation. What's fascinating is that fascism combined this anti-modern rage with a love for modern technology. It looked back to ancient national myths while embracing tanks and airplanes. It was this dynamic tension, this blend of the primitive and the futuristic, that made it so dangerously seductive. It promised to restore a lost sense of purpose by channeling modern chaos into a cult of violent national rebirth. So let's pull these threads together. We've seen how four powerful currents from the 19th century merged to create the ideological bedrock of fascism. First, Romantic nationalism gave it a soul, a mythic story of a chosen people with a special destiny. Second, revolutionary ideas stolen from syndicalism gave it a method, using powerful myths and the promise of violent action to mobilize the masses. Third, social Darwinism gave it a justification, a brutal logic of survival of the fittest that glorified domination and conquest. And finally, the fin de siècle crisis gave it an opportunity, channeling the anxieties of the modern world into a cult of destruction and renewal. Fascism wasn't an accident of history, it was a culmination. It grew from these primordial seeds which mutated and combined in response to the chaos and uncertainty of the time. Understanding these roots is not just about looking backward, it's about recognizing how these same ideas, about national purity, the power of myths, the righteousness of the strong, and the appeal of tearing it all down, can re-emerge today. History never repeats itself exactly, but its echoes are all around us if we know how to listen. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive. If you found this exploration valuable, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next installment, where we'll see how these ideas crystallized in the crucible of World War I.